If you do absolutely nothing else in your life, master your energy before somebody else does. This is super important, and especially in the times that we're living in, which are very distressing times. But we are in this part of the evolution where we are going to emerge as a butterfly if we can lift ourselves out of these kinds of relationships, lift ourselves out of these narratives, and bring ourselves to our highest and best potential. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Call Cut with Angélique. I'm Angélique. And today we're going to talk about how to rewrite the internal scripts that shape our lives. And this episode is about something so many of us struggle with and many of us talk about, but some of us still don't have the courage to talk about openly. And that is narcissistic dynamics. More specifically, the moment in life when we realize that some relationships, even with friends or family, may simply be vexatious to our spirit. Vexatious to our spirit, that's a phrase that I got from my stepfather many, many years ago when my stepfather said to me, we don't want to hang out with people who are vexatious to our spirit. And man, was he correct. Of course, it took me so many years after he initially told me this wonderful phrase before it actually sunk into the machine. I am nothing if not stubborn. But let's talk about it because we see narcissism played out in the global stage. We see it played out in our everyday lives. And I feel most people have conflicting views on this because narcissistic personality disorder is an actual thing. They classify it as a quote unquote mental illness. However, narcissistic tendencies and behaviors, which are service to self sort of mentalities, are prevalent. And we do see it. Now, I don't know if this is that the global consciousness is headed toward a more service to self sort of mentality where we're all kind of in this mental health crisis, or if it's something about to break, right? Because when we are so inundated on one side of the polarity spectrum, eventually the Ouroboros eats its tail and it pops back to its opposite. So there is hope that we will move into a more loving, compassionate, and empathetic world. However, right now, it does seem that these tendencies are prevalent and they can be anywhere in our space, family, coworker, friends. I feel family dynamics are usually the toughest for people to deal with because we have attachments to our family. Same with friends, certain friends, we may have attachments, especially if they're childhood friends or friends that we've had in our lives for a long time, or friends that are attached to groups or part of society. And, if you're somebody that is really hung up on the story of belonging, it's going to hurt to have to cut some of those relationships because you don't want to be ostracized or outed from a group. However, hopefully this will shed some light on power dynamics because even though a group may be appealing, whether it's a familial group or a friend group or some, coworkers sort of tag up, it doesn't mean it's any less toxic. We find oftentimes that our spirit knows that something is wrong long before our brain ever really kicks in. You leave a conversation and suddenly you have a headache. Your shoulders feel tight. Your stomach drops. You feel exhausted, confused, and at times strangely guilty, even though you walked into a conversation with somebody feeling perfectly fine. It's like your body knows something that your mind is still trying to figure out. And I think that's the influence of spirit, where your spirit feels the energy change, right? So I love the line vexatious to your spirit because you feel that shift in energy. And let's face it, we are energetic beings, and that is the first thing that we feel. So today we're going to talk about these dynamics, why they happen, why we sometimes stay in them far longer than we should, and most importantly, how to break the cycle without carrying resentment, anger, or the victim story into the next chapter of our lives. If you joined us last week, we were sitting down with Dr. Ilya Gogoras, who is the happiness doctor, and he highlighted that victim is one of the mentalities or stories that we carry around with us. And he said that one of the most powerful ones was called the navigator. And it's a person who navigates through life, who gets up and keeps going. They don't become the critic, they don't become the victim, and they don't become the observer. And he really goes into details about these archetypes. And I definitely suggest you watch if you haven't, because it's fascinating to see. And so when we know this, we want to pull ourselves out of a victim story, because the truth is, every single relationship in our life is a teacher of sorts. Some teach through love and others teach through contrast. And sometimes the lesson is simply this: we need to call cut, realign the energy, reframe the story, and write a new script. So let's get into what narcissistic dynamics feel like. And I apologize if I'm a little stuffy. I'm off camera again today because I'm not feeling my best, but we're gonna power through this, hopefully without a coughing fit. When people hear the word narcissist, they often picture extremes, right? Because narcissists do come in extremes that borderline sociopaths. But many narcissistic dynamics are actually very subtle, and they show up in our everyday relationships, as I explained earlier: friends, family members, partners, coworkers, etc. Often the first sign isn't something obvious that happens externally. It mostly happens internally. So your body reacts to something. You'll notice a headache every time you have that interaction, or you do feel energetically drained, or you're super happy when you leave the house and suddenly you get on a phone call with somebody, or you're in somebody's company and your mood drops. You're just not in a good mood anymore, or you don't feel happy, or you're angry. Or maybe you even start questioning memories of your own events. I actually had this with someone. This was my biological father. And my biological father was a master at this, where he would totally make you question what you saw. And we were using this as an example when we were trying to explain this to someone. It said, if you go out to dinner with him and you watch him have pizza, and somebody say, "Oh, what did he have for dinner?" And you say, "Oh, he had pizza." And he said, "No, I had a salad." And you're like, "But I saw you ate pizza. You sat right in front of me and you ate pizza." And, he'll look you straight in the face and say, "No, I didn't. I had salad. I ate salad. You ate pizza, but I didn't. I had salad." And you can go back and forth with him. And at some point, you start to question your sanity. You start to question whether or not you actually saw him eat pizza, or did he, in fact, have a salad and you missed it? That is frightening, right? When you start to question your own sanity as to whether or not an event actually occurred. And then that's often where the gaslighting enters the picture, right? And people who gaslight, at least for me, from my purposes, I definitely distance myself. If I have a conversation with somebody and they start that nonsense, I tell myself, okay, we're going to call cut. We're out of this, end scene. Thank you. I will now exit through the entrance because I'm done with this. For those of you that don't know, gaslighting is when somebody manipulates reality so you begin to doubt your own perception, right? You say something happened, they say it didn't. You remember a conversation, they insist you imagined it. And over time, this erodes into something very important, which is trust in your inner compass. So this is key, friends. When your inner compass becomes destabilized by doubt, people get to stay in unhealthy dynamics with you far longer than they should, because you begin to ask yourself, maybe I'm the problem. If I love this person enough, or maybe I did something wrong, or, okay, well, yeah, maybe I'm the one causing all of these issues. No. They're creating doubt. When you have doubt, it stops everything, stops all forward motion. You seriously reconsider everything. It paralyzes you. You stop moving forward toward your goals. You stop aligning with the things that are good in your life, because you start to question every single thing that comes in. You start to lose trust in you, the machine that keeps you safe. You start to question your own machine. I had this for a very long time. And for me, it then manifested into panic anxiety, because if I don't feel safe within my own skin, within my own decisions, within my own heart, where am I ever going to feel safe? Because we don't find that safety outside of ourselves. We can only find it inside of ourselves. And no matter how much external validation we get, "Oh, you're okay. You're okay." There's just something underlying that doesn't believe it. And so to really strengthen the vessel is to always have that inner compass, that inner strength, that inner fortitude, and inner trust in your intuition. That's how you stay in line. That's how you stay on the path. Because when your nervous system repeatedly feels unsafe around somebody, that is information. Your energetic field, your biofield, right, which is communicating with the unified field, is telling you that something is off. There's not a copacetic vibe. Perhaps we're not going to have peaceful coexistence with this person. It's an alarm system. It's a built-in alarm system. And we don't always listen to it. So let's get into that. Why do we stay, right? Why do we not listen to it? And one of the most fascinating things about these dynamics is how often they connect to our past. The stories that we grew up with, most of them were inherited, right? And many of us learn certain relational patterns very early in life. And maybe we learned that love had to be earned, or we learned that conflict led to abandonment. That was mine. And we learned to keep peace at all costs, because if you keep peace at all costs, even if somebody is vexatious to your spirit, at least you don't have to deal with abandonment, betrayal, loss, right? Nobody wants to deal with those. Those don't feel good. So when these similar patterns appear in adulthood, something in us recognizes them as home. It's very strange, but it's true. We recognize them as something that feels like home. Even if they're painful, even if they're unhealthy, they just feel familiar. And familiarity can masquerade as comfort. So sometimes people remain in draining relationships because they're unconsciously trying to resolve an old story. They think, if I could finally make this person understand me, ... If I could finally get their approval, ... If I could finally fix this relationship, then the wound from the past will heal. But often the real healing begins when you stop trying to win approval from the people who are committed to misunderstanding you. And that's where ancestral patterns could come into play. Sometimes we're not just dealing with the relationship in front of us, we're dealing with a lineage of patterns. Generations where people endured emotional manipulation. Generations where keeping the peace mattered more than telling the truth. And breaking those cycles can feel incredibly uncomfortable, because you're not just changing your own behavior, you're interrupting a pattern that may have been in existence for decades. When this happens, somebody is always painted as the villain. If you look in family dynamics, especially and also in group dynamics, someone is always painted as the villain, right? Always an enemy somebody has to destroy, man. And if you look at that consciousness in the macro and the micro, you see that there is something seriously wrong with the way the brain rationalizes its own survival. Because this idea that you are somehow threatened by someone that really isn't posing a threat. And oftentimes when people attack you for no apparent reason, they're attacking your energy. The threat they feel is in your light, in your talent, in your beauty, in your intelligence, all of these things that are highly coveted. And sometimes they manifest in one human being, right? Somebody is all of those things, or they check all the boxes. And someone who has lower self-esteem or doesn't see that in themselves can find that they are possessed there by the demon of envy. And if envy is in a bloodline, well, forget about it. That's when you get competition and comparison. Because all day long, that family is comparing themselves to one another. Who has the bigger house? Who has the better car? Who has the better kids? Who has the better job? Who's more successful? Who has the most money? And it's exhausting. And then they all act out on that Ferris wheel, right? They treat the one that isn't perceived as successful as less than the one who's perceived as successful. But the one who is quote unquote less than may have better heart, maybe a better person, a nicer, kinder human. But that doesn't matter, because success is determined by wealth, right? These external things. So all of these dynamics play out, and breaking free from them is not always easy, because to truly break free, you can't lower your frequency. That means that you can't break away through hatred. In fact, resentment actually tends to keep the energetic cord very much intact. So if we stay angry, we remain connected to the very thing that we're trying to move past. And that's not going to help anybody. And you know this when, you go to a family function and, you're ignoring people, and you can't just have a civil conversation with somebody that maybe you don't agree with, or maybe you don't particularly vibe with. But if you've healed that, you should be able to show up somewhere and be totally fine being in that person's presence. You may not like them. You may not want to have a relationship beyond that moment, but you don't have to bring down the walls of the house. You don't have to burn the whole building. And by the way, I am not saying that times in your life we don't burn a bridge. I'm a person who doesn't burn bridges. I blow them to the ground. And I can admit this about myself. If I have come to the conclusion that somebody has betrayed me and hurt me, etc., I will not harm them, because I do believe in the law of harm none. So I am not going to go out of my way to have a conflict or to speak poorly of them behind their back, which I would also suggest you not engage in, because speaking ill of someone behind their back is, again, keeping the cord connected to them. You just sit in that energy. The more you talk and talk and talk and talk about somebody, the more life you give that person, the more energy. So cut it right off. If you don't like someone, if they're not your vibe and they're not your tribe, just cut it right off. move their energy from your space. Go take an Epsom salt bath. Get those cords cut, sage yourself, Palo Alto, whatever works for you. Put a little sandalwood behind your ears, whatever you need to do to keep yourself grounded. But the more engaged you are with another human being, the more connected you are with them. Any kind of conflict that requires you and that person to be actively engaged in something, even if it's through a third party. So truly be aware of that. This goes the same at work. If you have a coworker that you don't vibe with, let it go. Go home, vent if you have to vent, but don't start conflict, because all of these things have a way of working themselves back to you. And even though you think you're justified in your anger or you're justified, it's very interesting how the universe teaches us lessons, and it teaches us through humility. And so sometimes when you start to go on a power trip and you want to hurt somebody else, that backfires on you. And when people say hurt people, it's absolutely true. And this is a phrase that's been around as long as, time itself. When we understand that hurt people, and we also understand that family dynamics are dynamics that go through bloodlines, which means that we're all suffering from the same thing, we're just manifesting it differently within our individual avatars, then we have to think about the idea that how holding compassion is the best way to heal. Healing through hatred never happens, right? Hate doesn't eradicate hate, it feeds it. The only thing that can heal hate is love. And that's a fact. If we stay angry, we remain connected to the very thing we're trying to move past. So instead, there's a better way to review those relationships, and that's through the lens as a teacher. And some teachers appear in our lives, as I said, positive. They encourage us, they support us, they help us grow through kindness and love and encouragement. And other teachers appear in a very different form. And they teach through contrast. They show us what misalignment feels like. And they push us to develop boundaries. They reveal parts of ourselves that still need healing. And that's kind of the beauty of the shadow, right? Is the shadow reveals where we need to heal those parts of ourselves that are calling for us. And if you think about the shadow being, like Peter Pan chasing his shadow, it's a child, right? It's that inner child. It's the part of us that is desperately seeking to be whole again, and it wants to merge with the whole, but it's been separated through trauma. When we view difficult people as teachers rather than our enemies, something interesting happens. That is the moment we reclaim our power, because the focus shifts from what did they do to me to what did this experience teach me? And that shift alone can break a cycle of victimhood. And as my dear friend, Dr. Ilya says, we want to be the navigator, not the victim. I really suggest you go listen to that episode because it's really good. Victimhood is something that many narcissistic dynamics depend upon, because when we identify as victims, we unconsciously recreate situations that reinforce that story. But when we step into authorship of our own lives, that story changes. And you have to remember, narcissists use victimization in two different ways. One, they attack you until you somehow attack them, right? They'll provoke you. You attack them, and suddenly they're the victim. And that is what makes narcissists so incredibly devious, is that this behavior really becomes a wall to healing. It's very difficult to heal with somebody who is committed to making you the villain in their story. And the reason they make you the villain is because of envy, jealousy. A narcissist wants to be the one that is adored and loved by everyone, because deep down they have a feeling of being deeply, deeply unloved or not good enough. And so they project this image of superiority over everyone. And then let's say someone comes along that is truly loved, or somebody, everybody thinks they're beautiful or handsome or successful. The narcissist will befriend that person or be also attracted to that light, but for a different reason. They then seek to destroy. They seek to go out and find all the things that are wrong with that person to show the world, hey, you think this person is perfect? Well, they're not. They're not that great. And so narcissists will do this over and over again. If you defend yourself or you go to attack them, then somehow they flip the story and they make you the villain. So no matter what happens, you don't win this by meeting this energy at the same level. You win this energy by disengaging from it. And this is where the call cut principle becomes incredibly powerful. In filmmaking, when a scene stops serving the story, we call cut. The director says cut, the cameras stop, actors reset, and a new take begins. Well, life works in a surprisingly similar way. When a relationship consistently drains your energy and your body is signaling distress every time you interact with that person, When a conversation leaves you feeling confused, diminished, and severely manipulated, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is call cut and walk away. And that doesn't mean it's going to be a dramatic confrontation. It sometimes simply means you step back, reduce contact, and release the need to explain yourself to somebody committed to misunderstanding you, because that is usually where you're at with a narcissistic interaction or somebody who is behaving in this way. They don't want to understand you. They have an idea of you. They've created a story around you. They're digging their heels in and they're believing that that is who you are. And they want everybody else to believe that story about you. You're not going to get people to change their minds. You simply have to go live your life. And the way you live your life is reclaiming your energy. Because every time we stay entangled in draining energy dynamics, that energy, our beautiful life force energy, becomes fragmented. And then when that energy clears and we get all that nasty negative energy out, your strength returns, your intuition comes back online, your body relaxes, you stop pumping cortisol, your adrenals calm down. You start to feel calm, you start to feel safe in your own skin and your own decisions. I will tell you this. Sometimes the thought of having to end a relationship with a family member, a coworker, or a friend that has been like an albatross around your neck can be daunting because you're afraid of repercussion. You're afraid of what's going to happen. But I tell you this, what is ultimately going to happen is you will grieve the loss of a relationship, because whenever an energetic cord is yanked from our aura, we do feel that loss. We do feel the hole there. And so we do have to be extra loving to ourselves and really make sure that we are taking good care of ourselves in that time that we grieve the loss of this person. But very quickly, you will start to see something miraculous happen. You will start to see that this emotional weight you've been carrying around seems to disappear. You will start to see that you feel stronger, you feel happier. And now other kinds of people are entering the unified field. You're starting to see people who are more in alignment with that strength and that beauty that you're bringing to the world, because now you are vibrating on their level. You're not vibrating on a lower level of feeling despair or not good enough or doubt. And that's how the devil keeps you down. And when I say devil, I mean the negative energy. That energy keeps you down and keeps it on that level, because envy, greed, jealousy, gluttony, all of those energies, when you see those played out in those dynamics, those are lower vibrational energies. And by keeping a high vibing person in doubt, a low vibing person brings you literally down to their level. So this is all a game of energy. We are here, as the great Dolores Cannon said, to master energy. That is what we're here to do. If you do absolutely nothing else in your life, master your energy before somebody else does. This is super important. And especially in the times that we're living in, which are very distressing times, but we are in this kind of part of the evolution where we are going to emerge as a butterfly if we can lift ourselves out of these kinds of relationships, lift ourselves out of these narratives, and bring ourselves to our highest and best potential. Now, if you're listening today and recognizing some of these patterns in your own life, take a moment to breathe, okay? You haven't done anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with you if you're still engaged in these narcissistic relationships. I mean, Jesus, I'm 46 years old and I cut off 2 more people last year, that were 2 recent friends. I mean, so talk about, you know, I'm over here, giving you the advice as best as I know how to live it. But I too make the mistake sometimes where I invite somebody into my sphere. Healing is an ongoing process. It's a process of self-discovery, and you heal in levels. Like an onion has layers, right? I think it was Shrek. An onion has layers. And when you peel back a layer and a layer and a layer, you start to find more and more and more power. And as you start to take these layers off, but it is a process. So sometimes people will infiltrate. They sometimes infiltrate through vulnerability. So don't be hard on yourself. You may be going through a vulnerable time and a narcissist comes waltzing right in the door. That happens. And when it does, we definitely have to make sure that we are cognizant of every single thing going on. Know that you are more vulnerable. If you see people trying to manipulate you, and let's face it, we're all pretty smart. We know when somebody's trying to manipulate us. Take a step back, take a look at it, reevaluate it. Remember that every person who enters your life plays a role in your growth. Some serve as guides, some serve as mirrors, and others arrive as catalysts for the transformation. The goal is not to hold a relationship forever. It's to move forward with wisdom, without resentment or bitterness or carrying the identity of the victim. When we release those stories, we free ourselves to step into something far more powerful, and that is our own authorship. And I like the word authorship because it means that you have the power of the pen. You write the story. Nobody is going to tell the story of you. You are the person who is the writer, director, creator of your series, and you're going to tell us how it ends. So if there's anything in your life right now that feels a little vexatious to your spirit, maybe today is the moment to take the pause, take a breath, and gently say to yourself, cut. Because the next scene of your life deserves your full, clear, unburdened energy. You have every bit of power to make your dreams come true. You absolutely can be the highest and best version of yourself any moment you decide you want to be it. But the power has to be in your hands. And as they say, the pen is always mightier than the sword. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Until next time, friends, keep shining. Thank you so much for joining me on Call Cut with Angélique. New episodes drop every Friday. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share with your friends. And remember, folks, no matter what life gives you, you must always keep shining.